Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the AP Arms. This is Paul. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Xelix, calling in from London today, and delighted to be welcomed by Molly, who's joining us from the US. First time at the AP Arms. So thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Paul. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Well, let's start with usual kind of introduction, quick bio on you, your background, and then a little bit about the company and the job that you do.
Sure. Excuse me. So Molly Gausch, I've spent about 19 years in sourcing and GBS leadership roles. So, my background is kind of industry agnostic. I've, worked in mainly, Fortune 500 companies in manufacturing, but, manufacturing, across the variety of, packaging to metal products to aerospace, and now with Zimmer Biomet, working in the medical device industry. So I spent probably about 12 of those years in sourcing leadership roles, and then the latter half in GPO GBS leadership roles. So right now I'm the global process owner for P2P at Zimmer Biomet and oversee our GBS teams that we have as Zimmer employees, as well as our BPO relationship too.
Amazing, thank you. And tell us a little bit about how the procure to pay function is set up in terms of locations, GBS centers.
Yeah. So we're operating off of a model where we have GBS hubs that serve each of our regions. So we have an Americas hub, an EMEA hub, and an APAC hub. Those hubs are, serving the entities and locations that sit there. We also have a BPO team that sits out of India as well as Romania. So we have team members, in a lot of geographies, in a lot of time zones supporting our P2P operation.
Yeah, brilliant. And I was saying to you before we started the recording, it's customary we ask our guests about their favorite British pub, but I think based in Pittsburgh, you have limited knowledge, so we'll let you off that question. Probably some Scottish ancestry or something based in Pittsburgh, potentially.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So look, the theme of today is all about people. And it's an interesting topic because, whatever industry or company our peers are in, everyone's faced with similar people challenges, training, technology adoption. So it'd be great to kick off by asking you, I guess, what changes you've seen within the accounts payable and procure to pay function, and also what changes you think might be coming in terms of who we hire, the role itself, the function, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest change is the infusion. One second, the biggest infusion. So I've been in these GBS, GPO roles for about like the last 7 or 8 years. So it's been an interesting time because you see automation coming in, automation tools. You've kind of watched the peak and flow of RPA coming in. AI is what everyone's talking about now. So I think watching the dynamic of teams over the last 7 or 8 years has been very interesting. I think as we started to lean into some automation tools years ago and RPA years ago, and seeing like the impact and the efficiencies that they brought, but also the emotional reaction for maybe teams, the changing feelings around those tools within GBS teams, and then kind of the reality of what those teams did or did not do to your GBS processes, and then now I think people are kind of huddled around what will AI really do within our processes. I mean, you guys know better than ever with the tool that you work in, but I think the day-to-day practitioner, my observation and talking, in industry is that, there's probably only about like 25% of people that have bit off and started using AI in a very material way. And there's a lot of folks that are waiting to see, how will this pan out, and, how will my organization allow for, regulate, work with AI. So I would say, some of the changing technology and automation, regardless of tool, has been the most major, watch out or impact in the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's interesting. It sounds like you went on the RPA journey and the automation journey. Did it deliver the efficiencies and the change of job description that it was promised, or how would you reflect on it?
I feel like a number of years ago, there was almost like an anxiety about automation and RPA, and like it's gonna take over, it's gonna do all of these things. And I'll be honest, I had a really good experience and productive experience with some of those tools. They fit a use case that in a pretty mature, repeatable environment could really function well. So in a lot of ways, it delivered significant efficiency to some of the P2P processes, definitely on the PO side. Repeatable tasks that then were performed by different bots. I think it wasn't to be underestimated, the maintenance involved in that. You create this thing and then you have to maintain this thing. And you have to, like, from a talent perspective, make sure that like is very well, documented, transitioned. And I think maybe in prior roles that might have been a little bit underestimated. And we probably had to plan for that a little bit better. I don't think, maybe on a holistic side, like we ever realized as much value as maybe you heard in news bites and sound clips of, where you were going to take, automation tools and RPA.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think, different companies have had different experiences. I think what we're seeing is the need to automate is getting greater. Or I probably should say people's desire to automate is getting greater. The idea that actually you'll throw people at the problem feels quite outdated now. So I think RPA began that shift of, okay, this is the right thing to do. But I think from what we're seeing, there's an interesting shift as well around moving team from doing and being at the coalface and in the trenches of the doing to being more of the overseeing, ensuring that the process is flowing correctly and the process is compliant, dealing with exceptions. And in some cases, it really works and it frees up those people then to focus on the more value adding stuff. And I know that's become a bit of kind of salesperson jargon about focus your team on more value adding stuff. But I do think in many cases now that's right. And that for me, I think is managing the supply chain better, protecting supply, driving better relationships with suppliers. So yeah, I think maybe RPA, from my perspective, didn't fully deliver the sales pitch and the promise, but definitely set off the journey towards automation. And I think AI will finish it off and deliver that vision and slightly then reshape the role from the doing to the overseeing, which I think is really interesting.
I think RPA was the mindset shift that we needed across GBS organizations, because I think maybe 5-7 years ago, I faced a lot of obstacles, like having teams embrace, these tools. There was a fear around them. And I think RPA, and seeing it come to fruition in some of the use cases, was the mindset shift that we needed to say, being an expert in this is actually going to be a differentiator. I should be leaning into this rather than, leaning out of this. And I think that mindset shift is what we need then to propel into, more significant tools.
Yeah. And when you and your team are hiring now in these functions, are you putting kind of the technology understanding higher up the list of requirements? Is that now kind of standard to do?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, you're looking say you're hiring for a P2P, processor, P2P, SME, P2P, specialist, whatever it may be. You think about your requirements, whether it be, education, accountant, language skills, because that's still a little bit relevant in a lot of markets. But then, clear differentiator is systems and experience in whether, and I'll even look you might not have had AI experience, but do you have automation experience? Do you have legacy RPA experience? Because that's going to tell me that your mind is already, looking for those ideas and those processes that, might be a use case for a more sophisticated tool. And I think those are definite differentiators in hiring. But I would say also what I would be looking for are people that have significant, not just skill based, but people that have gone through significant work experiences that show me they're adapt or they're inclined to change. So maybe they went through significant repatriation projects or work transitions or, significant system shifts. I think that's also a great differentiator to say, is this person going to thrive in a changing environment where, maybe we're infusing AI or we're changing things, just to indicate that this person is ready for a dynamic environment.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And then we talked a bit about obviously you've implemented tools in the past. There's always change management, even if it's a simple tool. There's going to be change management. What are some of the learnings, tips, tricks you can share from what you've seen firsthand?
Oh, change management is huge and not to be underestimated. So the one thing like I think I'll lean into is sometimes maybe in prior programs, I might not have, appreciated a true OCM leader or a true OCM expert. And if you have access to those in your organization, definitely heed the expertise and guidance. I think I learned over time, maybe you're implementing a new system, a new buying an invoicing tool, whatever it may be, like the amount of communication is not to be underestimated. And really, tell people what you're going to do, then tell them when you're going to do it, then tell them, remind them again and after. And I think, using some of those OCM experts is probably the best thing you can do. And then I think, tailoring messages as much as you possibly can and doing kind of like a stakeholder analysis. What's the change they're experiencing? What's the tailored message, the medium, and, over communicating as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I'd say candidly, it's something that we've probably got wrong at Xelix in the past as well, where we always thought, well, our tool's kind of easy to use and it's pretty intuitive. The customer will figure it out. And that was definitely the wrong mindset. Even an intuitive tool needs like a base level of documentation that people can refer to, but then also the kind of the in-person training. And often the
Yeah.
selection of like a champion, somebody who's passionate about it and can be that internal champion as well.
Yeah, as much as we want to like rely on self-service, tools, documents, materials, you never kind of get away from like a channel for people to come and ask questions, and that can really minimize noise in changes. So I don't know if you can always get away from, and now I think you can move from like a live meeting to a Teams channel, like being able to have a channel that's devoted to like project A, this is our OCM channel. Any issue that you have, just, reach out. There'll be someone here, X hour to X hour that can,
Yeah.
jump on a call with you, can really help. I think I've tended to work in organizations that I guess just need or appreciate that, kind of softer touch and want to be able to reach out and ask a question live.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And then obviously you're managing teams across time zones, across different locations. Pretty common, I guess, in the GBS world. What have you learned around like your style, your management style, tweaks you need to make for teams in different regions? Have you got any interesting learnings or anecdotes around that?
Yeah, I mean that's probably my favorite part of working in GBS environments is like the people element of getting to know people in different regions, different cultures, different languages. I think for me, there's a like a high context, low context person, and like understanding the culture that you're in, and if you're mismatched is really helpful. I'm a very explicit person. So like I'm going to say exactly what I want, and then I'm going to say it again to make sure that we're clear. And so I've found some very confusing scenarios where like we haven't done that well, where later you find out it's totally misunderstood, and I've used the word we mistakenly, and like then no one does anything because no one has any idea who's taking the action. So I think one understanding, are you like operating in a higher low context conversation and who's who, and then getting that clarity. But I've had a lot of fun getting to know all of the different cultures, and I've been a GPO in a couple of different organizations, so different centers in different parts of the world, and I would say that's probably my most favorite part of these types of jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in the last, 18 months, obviously there's been an
Mhm.
explosion of off-the-shelf AI tools that
Yeah.
anyone can use. Has your company been open to letting people experiment? Have you been trying to find your way around governance and compliance? How have you guys kind of approached this topic?
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. Like that governance and exploration, working for any large, Fortune 500 company, you're going to have a pretty healthy infrastructure around how, organizations want to partner with AI tools. And that's exactly, what we're going through now. I think there's a lot of like open questions around, security, accountability, integrity of the organization. As we consider tools, like I think there's a lot of interesting questions around like, do you even communicate with someone and let them know they're interacting with AI, for example? Are these, the questions or obligations we have to third parties that we might be communicating with? So I think, also there's a plethora of, tools popping up in the market, and there's like a lot of, careful examination of like who's really going to deliver the ROI that you're wanting and who's really going to meet the need that you have. And then I think there's also a component of like, any good sourcing organization wants to make sure, they're not, adding hundreds of AI providers, they're partnering with the right providers that meet the business needs. So I think there's also a component of, what's the strategy across the organization, so that we're, leveraging, the right use case with the right partner and leveraging as much as we can too. So I think there's a lot of very good questions around how companies are doing that and how they plan to do it in the future.
Yeah. And have you had the situation where team members are coming to you saying, oh, I think I can do something cool with this piece of technology, that you've kind of had to shut down, or have you let them explore? Have you had any examples like that?
I've had like maybe not, team members, but colleagues say like, I'm looking at this and they have, a pocket here that might be of use to you. And then I dig into it and understand, no, it's not going to meet this use case or this use case. And there's a little bit of smoke and mirrors in some places that I've seen where I'm like, no, that's not really going to deliver the actual efficiency specific to like P2P. Like, I think that like maybe there's some organizations that have created use cases in their avenue, and now they're trying to branch to another avenue. And I found like, if their core avenue is not P2P, I'm not finding the sophistication, or like, I'm not observing that I'm going to expect I'm not going to get that ROI that I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's a lot of tools. Obviously, there's the general use tools, which I think you're talking to, and there's
exactly.
narrow tools. But yeah, it's interesting. I look from our point of view in the last year, we've seen every company develop these kind of AI review boards, because everyone's correctly paranoid about, should we be bringing these tools into our company?
Yeah.
How's the data being trained? Is it secure? Obviously the right questions to ask. So yeah, for us, there's been a lot of learning around how to present to those boards and really get across the idea that, in our case, it's a narrow application of AI with pretty clear kind of guardrails. But I think within P2P broadly, there's a lot of application, a lot of excitement.
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody recently about maybe using LLMs to review contracts, to drive some contract compliance work, and that was just one interesting use case that's worth looking at. But yeah, a whole world of opportunity out there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then maybe last question, I guess, as you think about the next kind of 3 or 4 years, and that might be asking too long a horizon, but I guess what changes do you see at the company in terms of the P2P operation? Any strategic plans you can share with us that our listeners might find interesting?
Yeah. Well, let me think about that. So we're in a unique position. We've been on our GBS journey for a couple of years now, so we're actually, fairly new. So I think like we still have a great deal of opportunity in terms of, we've made some really great technology investments. We've, centralized all of our services. We're doing all of the right things and going in the right direction. And I think that really aligns with the company's long-term strategic plans. I still think we have a lot of upside. So like looking at these AI tools, I think that there are a lot of areas that, we could potentially consider. I think we have a huge opportunity in case management in terms of inquiry and response. So that's something that, I would like to look at. I'd love to, talk about, statements and policies. So like tons of policy interpretation and things like that, I think are great. So I think, we've talked about like, are these labor problems or process problems or efficiency problems? And I think we have a lot of opportunity to become more efficient. And, that aligns with some of our strategic programs, not only just for 2026, but, beyond into 27 and 28. I think there's a lot of upside.
Yeah, amazing. Well, look, we're at the end of our 20-minute slot. So a big thank you for joining us, Molly. You're a great speaker. Hopefully you'll make a second appearance on the AP Arms. But big thanks
very much
from us for joining us.
Thanks, Paul.
Cheers.